Hey everybody, what's going on? I may have to tone down that music in that intro a little bit. It's kind of loud, a little bit loud, but we'll figure that out later. But how y'all doing? Another Wednesday album club with the usual suspects. We got Kellen, Killing for Company. We got Jim, Mr. Morbid Crank, Mr. Eihwaz Recordings. We got the Brainsmasher himself, Ben, holding it down there in Iowa. How's it going, man?
Excellent. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, I hope you guys all had a great week. We're about halfway through it. And if I remember right, I set this up a few days ago. Hopefully, links to everybody's. I think links to everybody's on here. If not, I'll add them afterwards.
Look up Smash Brainer.
I gotta get him on there. I gotta get the Smash Brainer on there. And yeah, Jim picked last week. He picked this album right here. Let me make myself big. Preserved in Torment by Mortiferum. The stats on this band, they were formed in Olympia, Washington, with their first demo, Altar of Decay, being released in 2017. They released one more demo in 2018 before getting signed to Profound Lore Records. 2019 saw the release of their debut full-length Disgorged from Psychotic Depths. 2020, they released a split with Hyperdontia on Carbonized Records. What's that? I have not heard them. I have not heard that yet.
Their debut is amazing.
Yeah, and that leads us up to this new album, Preserved in Torment. We'll start like we normally start off. Let's start with first impressions. Jim.
Really, really great first impression. I had the first album, Disgorged in Psycho, whatever it is, and on vinyl, and really dug it. But for some reason, it was, there was a lot of stuff I was buying, and I just the second one came out, and I didn't buy it right away. But I went to go see Immolation, and these guys were opening up, so made sure to get there as early as I could. But unfortunately, they were still in the midst of the first song when I walked in the door. And oddly, some chick who worked there, this is a metal bar, by the way, was going making fun of them. I was like, why the fuck do you work at a metal bar and you're like, don't like death metal? Like, go fucking work at Subway, bitch. You know what I mean? Whatever. But anyway, so I walked in though, and man, they sounded great. They were kicking ass. They were playing almost exclusively tracks off this record. So I just immediately turned around, went to their merch booth and just bought the vinyl right then and there. Loved it. And in fact, I guess the sound guy was more of a Mortiferum fan than Immolation, because he actually gave them a much better sound. Immolation that came on, and even though they were perfect, they were amazing, and I enjoyed playing them. He buried the drums. All you could hear were cymbals, and the guitars were so loud they were distorted. But Mortiferum had a perfect balanced sound. So obviously first impressions, it was crushing enough for me to just turn right around at the merch booth and buy it. And and my brother, who was with me at the show, had never heard them before, and he was right behind me, and he actually bought one of everything in the booth. He instantly became a fan, has all their stuff now and all that. And I definitely like this record. So definitely it for me, it was crushing right away.
Kellen.
Yeah, I like Jim picked up Disgorge and Psychotic Depths in 2019. The Pacific Northwest death metal scene I had been paying attention to, and I knew they were from the area and was hearing good things, and I really liked it. I have to say, though, this record, when it came around last year, I probably listened to one song, heard something that was familiar, and kind of let it go. Not because it was bad, but I did not feel like I needed to listen to the entire record. I kind of knew what I was going to get. Thought it'd be very similar to the first record, and this kind of sound I had kind of had my fill of to some extent in recent years. But it's not to say that it's bad. We'll get into what we think about the songwriting and the production and so on and so forth later on. But I had not sat down with this record for the entire sort of spin, the full length listen since it came out, and kind of passed on it last year. So this week I had the opportunity to sit down and pay more attention to it, and I enjoyed it. But we'll kind of get into the details later on.
All right, Ben.
Well, so yeah, 2019. I still feel the same way I did back then, where I'm like, I don't need another good death metal band. My house is fucking full of these things. But I wound up picking up Disgorge from Psychotic Depths. I think on the recommendation of Pete, the Guttural Monk. Missed that guy. And I really liked it. The kind of flat, dead drum sound just kind of really painted their audio sonic personality quite a bit. And it's really satisfying kind of sound. So listened to it for a week or two straight, probably, like I kind of always do. But then this record came out, bought it right away, maybe listened to it 2 or 3 times, and just kind of, it got buried under more new stuff. I just kind of remember thinking I like the first one a little bit more, but I've been meaning to get back to listening to this some more. So this was my chance to do that. I like it. It's pretty good. We'll get more into the details on it, but favorable.
Yeah. For me, I'm kind of with Kellen on this. I had this one, Disgorge from Psychotic Depths. Bought it on vinyl because this album is really, really, really good. And comparing it to this new one that came out, we'll get into this later, but there's some differences. This album, I was just going to buy on vinyl. I waited too long. Didn't end up getting it. I might have commented it on in something, and my buddy Deathlance, cheers Deathlance, if you're watching, he sent this to me, and I was excited. I'm like, cool, okay, yeah. First impression didn't stick with me. It's nothing on it's bad. There's nothing bad about this record. It's just, it's so murky. It's well produced, but very murky. They focus a little bit more on the doom aspect of their sound on this one, I think. And with that murky production over the top of it, a lot of the songs kind of blend together. It wasn't until this week, spending some time with it. It was today. I spun it 3 times today, trying to wrap my head. I said, I got to find, TJ coming in with we were talking about this earlier, C+. There's some cool shit on here if you sit and really focus on it, but there's so much of this stuff out there. If anything, this is kind of indicative of what's going on in the global death metal resurgence, particularly America for sure. Maybe we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but this was a grower for me. First impression was pretty, I would, with TJ, meh. Okay, not bad, not great, placeholder kind of situation. How many times am I going to grab this? I don't know. But Jim, did you have something? We didn't go over this. Did you have a question to add to the pile?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Yep, I'm fucking muted. Yep. So yeah, my question is this now, and we can get into more about the sounds and stuff like that later. But I find that, a lot of people like, I feel like a lot of the same people who kind of, poo-poo on bands like, kind of, okay, there's no denying that these guys have a huge Finnish influence, have, an old incantation influence. So there's a lot of other bands that do too, though I think these guys do it much better than most. And I think they sprinkle in more originality than most. But that said, there's a lot of people who immediately just disregard, this kind of, sound and that has a lot of its roots in the old school. But then at the same time, they'll turn around and say, man, I love these new trad metal bands. I love these new, trad doom bands, but I hate OSDM, and so, my question is like, how come that isn't like, for most of those people, because it's so easy for you to hate on OSDM, in the new school. How come it's okay to say, well, but I like these new traditional metal bands, or I like these traditional doom bands? Like, what do you guys think about that? Like, why is that okay, but it's not okay to embrace, new bands that have a heavy influence for the old death metal sounds?
Can I go first?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways,
about Halloween.
dude, I was just thinking today as I was cooking dinner and listening to Halloween. I have listened to Halloween. I have either listened to Halloween, watched Halloween on YouTube, or watched an interview with Halloween every day for probably 2 years. It's not even a tough question. It's truth. Anyway, regarding the traditional metal thing and the OSDM thing, in a lot of ways, those two genres in particular are spinning in a very similar situation. I should say situation. Both of them, by their own rights and standards, they're great. They really are. But like the trad metal bands, I know Kellen has really fallen into this and really researched and has really gotten a lot of cool stuff that he really likes and connected with. And I've heard some stuff too, and everything I've heard I've liked, but there's so much of it. They're all kind of doing some very similar things. They're working from the exact same influences. I think a lot of new wave of British heavy metal is influencing their sound. This OSDM thing, it's old school death metal is what that stands for, if no one knows what that stands for. To me, old school death metal is different from this new school of death metal, trying to be old school. The old school death metal to me is more song and riff heavy. The riffs are catchy. There's more orchestration in the song structures. There's actual songwriting elements that are song-like. This modern school of death metal, I like it. I think it's really great. But it focuses, I've talked about this a million times, it focuses more on a polluted, cavernous sound. They tune their guitars down to A or below. It's super low tuned. And if you play guitar and if you got a guitar that's tuned to an A, it dictates the way you play. It sounds good to go zhung, 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 zhung. And there's not much tension on the strings. So the faster you play, if you're not really precise and you don't watch your finger bends, you don't get really clean. So you end up playing more chords and crunchy and, just kind of going with that. A lot of these bands model that sort of formula. It's not a bad thing. It sounds killer. I mean, we in the band have talked about, we should do an album that we're tuned to A, but it's probably going to end up sounding like this stuff. It would be a fun thing to do, but I just think, why is it okay for people to like the trad metal and shit on the OSDM? I mean, that to me is just a point of preference. Maybe they're not as much into the new school of death metal, or maybe they're not into death metal as much. I mean, the traditional death metal, there's great songwriting in that stuff. There's great playing. There's great production. Typically, there's great songsmithing and shredding and all that stuff. Everything that this is not. This OSDM is kind of the antithesis of that. But that I would say a point of preference, but I think both genres, even though they're, one's the murky underground sound and the trad's brighter, more positive, more upbeat, they're still very, very similar in a lot of ways as far as the road they're walking. Kellen, you want to comment on that, since I kind of was calling you out a couple times there in a good way?
It's a great question, Jim.
It is a great question. I don't know if I answered it, by the way, but good question.
Well, because so let's just take the two sides of the comparison between, because I do think they have, in terms of their lifespan, have a very similar time frame, and specifically the new wave of traditional heavy metal and the old school death metal revival. Somewhere around, in my opinion, like around mid-aughts, the ball starts to get rolling. For me, 2008, 2009, they really come on the scene. So, I mean, I can say, like, the bands that I remember initially associating with the old school death metal, I think of like early Necrovation, Morbus Cron. They're like bands that were coming around. I think the first Dead Congregation comes out in 2008. Like,
great band. So is Necrovation. What a great band. Sorry, go ahead.
They just came out. They have a new EP that's coming out next year that I saw Blood Harvest is putting out. But
fucking sweet.
I guess, but at the same time, the new wave of traditional heavy metal gets going. And the difference for me, like, first off, I would say there is so much new music coming out now. I would probably say for the amount of records I actually end up picking up within both genres is maybe 1/30th, 1/40th of what is released on an annual basis. So it's not that I don't like it. It's just how much is coming out. Like, if you go to the new wave of traditional heavy metal YouTube page, the person running that page is putting up new bands, new releases on an incredibly large scale every day. How many of them I actually think are great and worth picking up? Very little.
But they're all probably really decent.
They're okay, but like, do they feel important or essential, or that I'm missing out if I don't pick them up? Like, how many of them do I grab and think I need in my collection? So I guess the difference between the two of them, though, I want to clarify, is I have far less background in traditional heavy metal. I have a whole lot, like, my beginning with metal, generally speaking, is within death metal, black metal.
Yep.
So I had so much more to learn going back and trying to retrace heavy metal steps through the essentially 1980s into, you could say, the late 70s with traditional heavy metal. So there's I think more for me to like dig into, versus what was happening was around 2008, 2009, I was getting into the old school death metal, sort of newer bands, and learning more about essentially 90s death metal or late 80s death metal. What happened to me around 2016, 17, I started to feel like my excitement had slowed, let's just say. Like, I felt like to some degree I've been satiated with that appetite, and I was looking for something a little bit different from death metal. I wrote down, so from the Pacific Northwest right now, younger death metal bands: Fetid, Witch Vomit, Cerebral Rot, Disembowel, Trivium Foul, and Ossuarium. Just those are some from the Pacific Northwest. They're all good. I think you can make a case that Mortiferum might be the best out of the group. But I think that I'm bringing that up to say, like, that's the scale of new bands that are coming out. I think has potentially, like this record, deterred me from exploring to the kind of length that they deserve. It is just like a kind of, I think when you had Chris Black on from Pharaoh, I think he said, if you are trying to keep up with new releases nowadays, it's like you're being hit with a fire hose. And that is exactly what I feel like with new releases. Like, I'm trying to keep pace with it. I think that's probably a disservice to a lot of new bands out now who are potentially, I'm often getting to them late just because there's a certain kind of hesitancy or a lack of interest, generally speaking, with that sound right now. You have to do a lot to overcome what all over a decade of momentum has sort of pushed. And so I think for me, that's kind of what's difficult with OSDM right now. Every single year I will pick up a handful, and I will love them, and they're great. Like last year, I think Rothadas was the one that kind of was a Death Doom release that I liked a lot, on Mesako Unojo. Came out on that label, and it's kind of a Death Doom, but album. And that's why it's going to be like 2-3 I'll on an annual basis pick up. But there's going to be probably 30 that are worthy of my attention. And I just won't be able to dedicate the same kind of time because I'm kind of looking for something else in death metal right now. So if there are people who are like, OSDM, I'm bored with it. I'm not trying to say that at all. Like, it's not a bad genre. There aren't bad bands in it. I don't want to say that. It's just, for me personally, the ones that I get really excited about are the ones that I first discovered about a decade ago that have really like stayed with me. Like that first Morbus Kron record, I absolutely loved. The Swevin, their follow-up, like that was a killer record. So the first Tribulation record, I feel, is like completely, you know, by comparison to the goth death stuff they have going on now.
A very thrashy record.
Right.
The first one was good, and then it just fell off for me.
Right. Right. And that's 2009. And I remember those records vividly. So, and in that sense, I never really got past that time period. So I don't want to like dismiss this record or even bands that are playing in this style right now. It's just, for me, and my listening habits, with a little bit of sort of fatigue or hesitancy to get into it.
All right. Ben.
Hard to not tread on what all of you already expounded upon. I think what makes these bands seem less great than what maybe we're used to is that when there's 600 of a thing, the best doesn't seem like it's as good as if there were only 30 of a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's being like, the greatness of some of these bands is being diluted by how many there are out there and how much time I think we spend listening to a ton of mediocre stuff to find the best stuff, so that you can only spend a little bit of amount of time on the great stuff. So when you've got to kind of pull yourself back to say like, no, I want to spend time with this fucking great album and not just, you know, constantly checking out new things. That's not to say that I'm saying don't start a new band, no whatsoever. I want to play in an old school death metal band myself really bad. And I don't fucking care if people hear it. I don't really care what winds up happening, but I love hearing it. I love feeling it. I can't blame anybody for having a hell of a good time with their friends by playing any kind of metal. I'm never going to say don't fucking do it. Do it. But it's really hard as a listener to, the fire hose analogy is absolutely perfect. It's blasting all over my entire house and my life. And I love it. But the albums that resonate with me the way that like Faytooth did are really few and far between. So I enjoy albums more these days, just like on a sonic kind of aesthetic level, rather than something like deeply touching me like that Faytooth totally took me by surprise.
Yeah. All right, Jim.
What, answering my own question?
You answered your own question. You proposed it. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, you know, I still don't think that sort of excuses the abuse that OSDM gets, in my opinion. But I will say that, yeah, you know, it makes it hard, you know what I mean? You know, to find stuff, you know, but what I do in response to that, I mean, not going to offer up a problem without a solution, is I just stick with like very specific labels, you know what I mean? And then barring that, I stick with a few people whose opinions I respond to, you know, you know, and for me, you know, I've always, and you know, I will not say that I like everything Profound Lore puts out, but if on the death metal side, Chris Bruni, his selections for Profound Lore, typically I enjoy, you know, typically I feel like he's got a discerning ear. So, you know, some of the other labels that, you know, kind of, you know, I'm not going to name names here because I love the underground and I don't feel like doing that. But there's some labels who just like sign anybody and put a CD out of it or whatever. And that makes it hard. There's some saturation that comes from that. But I think if you find someone that, or some folks, you know, people in a group or whatever who tend to curate sounds that, you know, you can trust or have a track record of it, you know, that's what I use to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. And that's what works for me. I feel like, you know, that there's just I feel like I just hear people like say like, well, this sort of like resurrection of this is okay, but this isn't. And what's really weird is all metal is just a continuing life force of everything that has come before, all of it, I mean, starts from Sabbath and Blue Cheer, and then it just keeps on going from there. And then, everybody's like, so I really don't even like the term old school death metal because it's just fucking death metal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
what it is. It's just death metal, dude. You know what I mean? There's no trad metal. There's just heavy metal. You know what I mean? There's just, so I just kind of feel like, we get kind of too caught up in like, oh, this is a rehash of that. Well, all metal is a rehash of everything. When you listen to country, I mean, some people could say old school country people, you sound like a fucking moron. Country music is country music. You know, when you listen to it from the fucking 50s and 60s, it's country music. You know what I mean? You don't like hear about, oh, that guy, he's old school country. You can, to me, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds the same. The production may be different, but the music's the same. So that's just kind of my opinion on that. Is that you may get too caught up in labeling things, and that leads to automatic dismissal. And but yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
If I could add, just sitting here thinking about it, we started Worm Gear in 95. And during that time, everything was New York style brutal death metal. Every demo that came in the door, every CD, it was Suffocation, Internal Bleeding, Flesh Grind, all these bands on their own right. They're technically amazing and great. And then there's the slam death metal, all this stuff. I just see this whole wave of traditional heavy metal and this OSDM thing. It has a shelf life. That doesn't mean it's going to go away, but I think people's willingness to support it as crazily is it's going to wane. And you got labels like, I'm not slamming these labels, but Caligari and Maggot Stomp. I mean, it's cool. They're putting out stuff. When you see that Maggot Stomp logo, you know what you're going to get. But they very much throw in on everything. I mean, they've flooded the market with these bands that are good, but they're just all kind of singing, all coming from the same voice. And I get it. I mean, death metal's had a lot of years to evolve, and this is the latest evolution of it. This is where we're at. And this evolution, they're trying to strip things away and go more simplistic and go for a darker atmosphere. Fine, great. But the bigger question here is, where is death metal? Where can it go? I mean, it can go wherever people take it. I mean, that's easy to say, but what do you got to do? I mean, you got bands like Imperial Triumphant. They might be a little more black metal. I don't know, but there's either strip it down and go super detuned and murky, or go so complex and, get out your protractor and your compass and your Texas Instruments calculator to figure out what the fuck you're listening to.
Mm.
Where's it to go? I mean, what's the next phase of evolution for this style of music? Is it to continue to wallow?
Let's ask the guitar player from the Glorious Dead.
Yeah, I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not, and we're just doing what we're doing. We're trying to write good songs, which every band is trying to write good songs. But we're old, so we're coming from that realm of influence. We lived through the riff-based, song-based death metal, and that's where we're coming from.
Our old death metal.
yeah. Believe me, I feel it every day. But
so
can I just add one thing here?
Yeah, I was trying to continue the conversation here.
Sure. I don't think if you love this style of death metal and like, not in the sense that, how do I want to phrase this? There's some parts of my collection I never get tired of. Like, personally, I've talked about this a few times. I love a specific period of death metal because it relates to my nostalgia. So like, from the time like late 90s to about 2006, 2007, the death metal from that time period, I can't get enough of. I don't care if it's how original any of it is. Like, it may sound completely the same, but it makes me feel like I'm 20 years old again. And I'm an unapologetic collector and connoisseur of that shit. I don't care if it's C grade or D grade or what level of like quality or how pertinent it is. Like, I'm unapologetically a fan of it, and it's something that I'm dedicated to as a collector, just because of my age and my relationship with the genre. So if anyone out there feels that way, like if you're young right now and you're listening to this what's being called old school death metal, and it is 100% who you are and what you love, collect the shit out of it. Like, you don't have to listen to other people complain about it if it's not your thing, right? If you're someone who's an older collector, but you love revisiting what it meant to be listening to Demigod or whatever back when you were younger, and you find it in this band, awesome. You know what I mean? So I don't want to completely side with the idea that it needs to be groundbreaking in order to be, for you to have an emotional connection or to be important to you personally. Some people, like the gentleman above me here, has an affection for a bolt thrower, and he can listen to that thing all day long, and it's never right. It's never going to get tiring, right? That sound is, for some reason, forever ingrained.
Mm-hmm.
So I think instead of necessarily pushing towards the idea that bands need to be groundbreaking, I also want to like be sympathetic to fans out there who are 100% committed to this sound and don't care how many times they hear it. It just makes them feel good. It's what they're in for when it comes to death metal. So I think that's just another side of the coin that I wanted to throw in there for our conversation. Anyway.
Great point.
You know, and to expand on that, I mean, to basically reiterate what you're saying, that is like a human thing. I mean, wherever you jump into something, you know, the first album you hear, say the first album by Gorefest I heard was Erase. Love that record. It's great. It's amazing, even though it's a piece of shit record and it sounds nothing like the rest of their stuff. But wherever you jump in on something, that's where you're going to connect to. I mean, the youth of today are jumping into this OSDM thing. They're hearing it as law. You know, I remember a mutual friend of me and TJ's, Matt. He got into metal late, and he got into the melodic death metal stuff, like In Flames and stuff during like Jester Race era. That was his main stomping ground. He's a definite diehard metalhead. He loved it, but he'd come over to my house and I'd try to play him some of the older stuff. I'd like put on like Voivod or something. He'd be sitting, he's like, I don't know, dude, this just sounds like glam metal to me. I'd be just like, what did you say? You know, it's like, this makes no sense, but it's all where you jump in to the flow. You just got to go with the flow from there. And as your tastes expand, you know, you might pick up on some other things. And I will say, for people that are way into this stuff and have, you know, 100 maggot stomp tapes that all sound very similar to each other, it's very important to diversify musically. You got to. I mean, I'm a metalhead. I always will be, but I like other styles of music too. I like goth. I like industrial. You know, I like whatever else. It's ABBA. Good. No.
You do like ABBA. Let's hear it.
I like ABBA. I like ABBA, not opera. You got to have jumping off points when you're starting to feel that oversaturation, that loss of interest. You got to have something to recharge the batteries with. And it doesn't have to be as massive of a collection as what you may already have in your main interest, but it is important to recharge batteries. I've had friends that are into fast death metal only, like Angel Corpse, you know, Nile, shit like that. Anything else they hear just you know, I'm just so burnt out. I just not hearing anything new that I like. I'm like, because you like such a small window of a bigger picture, you know, of a bigger house or whatever the fuck I'm trying to throw out there. But great topic though. Great topic, Jim. Yes, indeed. Mortiferum. Do we have anything else to throw into this before we jump out here? All right. We're going into the musicality and composition of Preserved in Torment. Ben. You're first this time, buddy.
Okay. I feel like this album is very samey. I think they kind of have two tracks. And they just kind of alternate between fast and chuggy, churny. And like I said, it's satisfying sonically. I can listen to this kind of thing a lot, and I do. But compositionally, I just don't hear a lot of things that like pick my ear and make me go, "Oh, good idea." That are like, "Oh, this part is way better than the rest." It's like all the parts are killer, so it's all kind of the same-ish mediocre killer. It's like people say Marduk's always blasting, so are they really that fast if it's always fast? Like so I would be more moved and pulled in if there were more diverse tempos or ideas or instrumentations or styles at play here, but I'm just really hearing a lot of the same killer thing for the breadth of the whole album. Everything just seems like it's really in lockstep tempos, just kind of not a lot of movement out of their very distinct style and personality. They're taking that kind of a very unique sound. Like, I don't know, it sounds like a lot of other stuff, but they've moved away into a certain sonic little personality niche that I think is very unique to them, and they utilize it to the death. So, like, yeah, I don't get a whole lot out of this, like, compositionally or artistically. It's really just like a brain scraping kind of chugging, churning, headbang kind of thing.
All right, Jim.
I think you can do chugging and churning, headbang kind of thing, and be compositionally interesting. I do feel like with this album that is a choice on their part. What these guys sound like to me is like a slowed down, less complex Demilich. You know what I mean? With some, like, maybe incantation love here and there. The Craig albums era. But even though that description may be a little encompassing for a lot of other bands in this genre, I feel like they do it with a little bit more finesse, because like there are some unique things thrown in here to me to make it interesting. Like the definition in the guitars, you can hear what they're doing in the guitars. You can hear the picking, you can hear the notes. It isn't just a wash of fucking reverb that drowns it out. You don't know what's going on. The bass is high up in the mix, though I prefer how it was higher up on the debut. I actually liked the mix better on the debut for the bass. It was more, centered, and you could hear it better. But also, and you alluded to it earlier, Ben, like, the drum sound on this is very unique. Like he tunes his toms really loosely. There's a lot of wobble there.
It sounds flat.
Yeah. It sounds, but you know what? That's
Kinda
what
cool.
Makes it stand out.
Makes it heavier.
Who the fuck is doing that? It's a very interesting choice. And when I saw them live, I was like, what the fuck? This guy's got this tiny little, he's got like a snare, 2 toms, and like 2 cymbals and a hi-hat. And it was very tiny drum set, but man, he makes it work. You know what I mean? Yeah. When he's bashing on that ride and it sounds like a fucking bell, and he does it like on every, I love that, man. Like, almost every note I have about this record is really about, I mention the drums every time, because I like the choices that this guy makes. And, and for me, I will take, something that is simple and would inspire me to bang my head, especially on, for instance, the second track on 320 and 510. Listen to that fucking riff. And if you don't feel compelled to bang your head, then stop watching this fucking show. Go fuck yourself. Because those riffs are headbang inducing badassery. And so I definitely feel like there is something to give there. And even though I can kind of understand where you're coming from with this sameness thing, for me, it's more like we chose a mood, you know what I mean? And we're creating that mood, but we're punctuating it with like really intense, cool, tempo changing nuggets that are intriguing as you give it more repeated listens. And if you can push your, I wouldn't, well, for me, it's not a push, but if it is more of a slog for you, make sure you get to, the closer, because that song, Mephitis of Disease, dude, there is riffs galore all over it. And I don't mean just like straight power chords and stuff like that. Some, again, for me, slowed down Demilich type stuff, which is great because I love Demilich, but they're so complicated. Sometimes I just start staring off into space and I don't want to listen to it anymore,
Mm-hmm.
But what I like about Mortiferum and what they choose to do is they play the riffs enough times where you can like get into them, where you can get a feel for them, where the riff doesn't just appear and it's gone before you can, get a vibe out of it. And and I keep coming back to some things that Ben said, but one thing you said, Ben, was like, it's a very like, sonically satisfying sound. I couldn't have put it better myself. That is what I feel when I listen to this. And, you don't stumble upon sonically satisfying without intent. You know what I mean? I think, and, you mentioned earlier, Kellen, Triumvir Foul. Well, the singer guitar player is also in that band. He's in both bands, so I can see that there's a connection there, and even though I think from the surface, if you kind of see like, that sea of those bands are, we're kind of doing with those similar influences for a while. Most of them have fallen by the wayside. Most of them don't grab anyone's attention, but these guys open up for Immolation for a reason. I think they have something special, and there's bands like Crips who are also, from Finland, a very similar sound, but they have weathered that storm of like, that sort of caverny and like all that shit's gone, but they're still around. Why? Because Crips is fucking good. Why? Because these guys are good. So for me, I think there is something compositionally intriguing here. I do think that there's some interesting choices made, that give this album just enough color to make it stand on top of the pile.
Okay, the defense rests his case. I'm going to change my vote to this album rules. Kellen.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the Finland versus or contributing from the Northeast kind of death metal. I think those regions contribute to the sort of guitar and riff focus for this record. And the band in general, I 100% agree with Jim in terms of the drums being sort of the perpetual catalyst for this band. Like it almost, the sort of predominant mid-paced nature to them, how it just sort of churns. I always felt like when the drummer would find a moment to make its way over to the ride, and it was like an exclamation point in that song. It was such, none of it is necessarily surprising, right? Like, and that's what I have written in my notes is completely satisfied but never surprised. And that's what they kind of give you, is everything here is familiar. But I do want to I was thinking about Crips leading into this because they've been around for a little bit longer. And I do think to Jim's point, they've kind of weathered the storm. I would put Mortiferum in the same sort of category, is like, this is who they are. This is what they're going to do. Either are 100% in and okay with it, and you're going to know what to expect and enjoy. Or, and you're not going to necessarily look for anything too dramatically different. So I don't really have too much to add other than I kept coming back to the drumming for this record, and this band is sort of being a hallmark that provided a sense of momentum or dynamic shift. He's sort of a singular player in that aspect, that the guitars kind of continually have the same sort of pacing and momentum to them. But how the drummer chooses to sort of navigate that is where you get kind of the push and pull on this record. Is he can overemphasize a moment by speeding it up into a blast beat, or sort of transition into something a bit more slower paced, or if you want to drop the hammer, you make your way over to that ride and drive your point home. So that's kind of what I thought about the songwriting here.
All right. I listened to this album quite a bit this week, and sonically and kind of stylistically, I hear a lot of Disma, especially that full low growl and everything. Musically, some of the riffs, I hear Incantation a little bit, and there's a little bit of their own style in there too. But this whole album just kind of makes me do this for the whole thing. That's it. That's what it does. And I'm coming
That's
off.
all you need,
Marty. I know.
That's all you need.
Your face hurts after about the fourth song. You start to get a cramp up in here. it sounds like I'm slamming on this band but this is a really good album, but I just don't hear, I mean, I'm going to get into some positive points when we get into the songs, but I'm left at the end. I enjoyed it, but I was underwhelmed by it. And that's not, I love the drum sound. I love that, the heads are hardly holding on to the the drums. There's tunes so low. It's just sick.
Where did that tuning key go?
Yeah, that's all right. Get a pair of pliers and loosen them all up. It's just their dynamics are fast and then slow. There might be an occasional mid-pace, plot in there, but I mean that's the range of their dynamics. The riffs, you can hear them all, but they're just kind of swarming around in there, and I'm just left at the end feeling like I missed something. Like there was something, maybe an inflection in the vocals, go higher or something to, offer a little bit more contrast to just the low, like you're, walking through, waist deep in a murky swamp getting eaten by mosquitoes kind of feel. That's what this album feels like to me. It's kind of like you're walking through that swamp right there, except the mosquitoes are, chewing you alive. But I like all the elements. I like a lot of the riffs. There's some on here I'm going to point out are really cool. This album here, I don't know what it is. There's something about this album. I don't know if it's the production. The production's a little bit brighter. It's a little bit more raw, and the guitars don't seem tuned as low on this. I don't know if it's just the production technique on this new one. It sounds like they had a bigger budget on the new album. It's really produced really well. This here is just kind of raw, but it's produced really well. It just gives this album a lot more energy. I mean, they're still doing a lot of the same things, but the riffs tend to pop out at me more. There just seems to be more a fire in their songwriting. You know what I mean? Yeah. Thanks for paraphrasing me there and basically wrapping it up for me. But yeah, it's underwhelming, but not bad. I would even say it's good. I wouldn't say it's not bad. I would say it's a good album. But yeah, let's get into production. Jim.
No surprise, just carrying off what I said earlier. This is a very, it's a well overused term, but I think it bears repeating here that this actually is an atmosphere. There is atmosphere in this stuff. It's not an atmospheric death metal album. This is just death metal, but there's atmosphere to it, because of the choices in the production to keep it, murky sounding, but with definition. And what I like about this, and something that I didn't catch when I first listened to it, but on subsequent listens, I realized there's no intros. There's no like weird, crazy synth. There's no horror music, organs connecting these songs. It's just song, some feedback maybe in between these two connecting them, song. And a lot of bands, that try to create like a dark atmosphere like this that permeates every song, rely heavily on sound effects of some sort, you know what I mean, or some kind of synthesized effect or something. But these guys don't. This is guitar, bass, and drums all the way through, from the first note to the last. And that was another thing that when I realized that I was like, hell yeah, man, because they don't have any crutches here, in creating what they were trying to do. In creating that darkness, they rely solely on guitar, bass, drums, and vocals. And to play this style of very doom-laden death metal, and to achieve that without any sort of like, outside samples or whatever, I think is a testament to a good producer and a good production choices on their behalf, and to making sure that the instruments were very balanced in such a way. The only things that I would say I do prefer on the first album, I mentioned this earlier, I like the bass was more up front. It's still there, you can always hear it. Like when you want to listen to it on this record, you can always hear the bass. But I liked how, to Marty's point, it was brighter on the first album. I love distorted bass when it's like more up front, not distorted and hidden. So I ding him a little bit for that on this record production wise. But other than that, I really love the again, I'll just keep going. So the drums, I mean, really make this record for me. You know, just a very unique player, a very, very unique choices, very unique sounds. And the guitars, you know, while tuned super low, while murky, you know, these guys, you know, chose their equalization in such a way where there's definition in the riffing, there's definition in the tremolo picking, there's definition in, like, you know, the triads and the like miniature scale type things they do. So no, I think that the production is right on for this album. I will say, yes, I could use a little bit more brightness on the bass, but other than that, you know, I think for what this album represents and is trying to achieve, that they 90% made the right call on you know, twisting the knobs for this.
Ben,
I think the producer is a pretty big part of bringing this band's personality to record well. I think that's an important part of their sound. I watched some live footage of them. Looks great. I was really surprised the drummer is like singing the whole time. But the sound in the studio, I think, is what really brings them out of the kind of more samey, boring crowd of this kind of thing. And it makes me pay attention more to what they're doing and just enjoying more of what they have to offer. Everything sounds crisp and nice and clean. I do like the first record a little bit more, I think, for its nastiness a little bit more. But yeah, I've got like no complaints about the sound on this thing. It's great. I had a thought that I was going to bring up, but I left behind. Sounds great. Yeah.
all right.
Super heavy.
If you come back to it, you still have time to figure out what you're going to say. Kellen.
Yeah.
I don't have too much to add here. I would say, Jim briefly touched on this. There are leads on this record. And for as murky and down-tuned and riffs dripping off the bone kind of production going on here, you can make out the lead work. They're trying to bring in a little bit more melody to the riff, to sort of add in some secondary parts. It's contributes in a way, it does not distract. There are things like, you know, Jim touched on how the bass is sort of mixed in a little bit with the guitars. You know, in the same way the vocals are kind of meld. But I don't really know if you're looking for a whole lot of division on a record like this. It might contribute to the overall atmosphere and identity of the band. So I don't really have too many complaints based on that kind of, I guess, you know, attempt to sort of have something cohesive, that they want to drive home that aspect of how dark and gloomy and doom-laden their death metal is. So those actually might be sort of additions, not subtractions from the band sound. So I really don't have many complaints, just because I think all of the factors that could potentially serve as like, this is, you know, less clear or need better definition at the same time, are what they're going for. So in that regard, I don't have too many complaints about the sound on this record. I have not A-B'd it with this past week. I have the first one on vinyl. I didn't pull it out and compare and contrast. So I don't have anything to add in terms of the, like, what the first one sounded versus the second. But maybe something I'll do here in the future.
All right. For me, I think the production is great. And a band like this playing so low and down-tuned, things can get really murky, but to their benefit, there's a clarity. Even though there's no sacrifice in the darkness and the murky and the brutal sound, you can hear everything. And, you know, bass is a little quiet, but you can hear those riffs cutting through. The vocals stand where they need to be. They're not too on top. They're not too in. They're right where they need to be. The production and the mix is great. I don't know what they used, if they just recorded amps or if they used DIs or what they did, but yeah, yeah, I've got really nothing to add other than it sounds really beefy. It's a really beefy, heavy record, and that's really a big appeal to this as well, is how good it sounds. I mean, you can put it on, turn it up, and it gets better the more you turn it up. I mean, it's just a really good, full feeling, and doesn't take anything away from the music. If anything, it helps. If it was a poor production, I think it would have made this album a little bit less discernible, and considering how low everything is. But let's go to favorite, least favorite songs. Kellen.
All right. So I really don't have any songs that I disliked altogether. I do agree that this album gets going and they get to work. Like there is no lead in or build up. It's just, turn it on, let's crush kind of a record. My two favorite tracks though were the second track, Incubus of Bloodstained Visions.
That's on my list too.
And the fourth track, Exhumed from
That's
Mortal
on my
Fear.
list too. You cheating off my paper again.
Okay. All right. Well, so sorry, but
no, it's all good.
The rest of the songs aren't bad. It's just when I was listening to them over the course of the past couple of days, I initially had the same sort of Ben's the kind of sameness a little bit, and I was like, no, I have to come back. They're going to ask me this question. I need to have favorite songs ready to go because I do not want to. So I listened, and every time a riff grabbed me, and kind of that moment where you're like, okay, no, this is a moment I want to go back, and I don't know where I am on the record. I don't know which track this is, but the past 15 seconds I need to, and so I would stop whatever I was doing. I'd go and find the track, and I'd be like, okay, these are the ones that stand out the most to me. So, and I think to some degree that's, we haven't got to our conclusions yet, but that's kind of how I feel about the record overall. There's nothing really bad here. The moments that are great are tremendous. And those two tracks are the ones that I will kind of, if you were to ask me to, because if we're going to pick this up or not in the future, we'll talk about at the end. But because I don't own this, those are the songs that I would recommend someone go check out immediately, and the ones that I would go back to. So yeah, favorite songs.
All right, Ben.
I'm gonna be kind of a stick in the mud on this one. So I've probably played this 6 times or so over the last week. I've actually been stuck listening to Marillion's what is it? Childhood. I'm actually kind of in a 70s mood right now.
No, that's cool, but it's this hurts a little bit when you put that on after Marillion, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it stings a little.
Childhood, that's the one. And I was stoked to find that in a used bin. Anyways, so the first time I put this on, I was like, God, yeah, remember I don't the first time a week ago. I don't love this as much as I wanted to. Second time, I was kind of this is pretty good, but again, I don't love this as much as I want to. But then last night I put it on again, and today I listened to it maybe 3 times or so, and I started to really, I guess, come out to it more. But that I still wouldn't say that I can differentiate many of the tracks from one another. It all just kind of plays as one big, long, great, chunky kind of song. I guess what I miss about this album is that I feel like a good album has really great standout tracks and some songs that are just maybe not as great, that just kind of get you to a bigger highlight or just kind of different ideas. I need more variations so that I can have a little bit of a rest, or I seem like I'm coming down off of a high from a great song. And here it's just all killer, the same thing, and I just I tap out on the same thing after a while. There's some standout riffs here and there, but yeah, I can't remember them. It sounds like the first time I've listened to it every time I put it on. So yeah,
Jim.
Kind of a wash.
Ben, you need to listen to the last song. There's plenty of variety on that. Pay some attention to track 6, and you'll be surprised. But I agree with Kellen and Marty. Incubus of Bloodstained Visions is my favorite song on here. That's the one where I was saying at 320 and 510, there's just that fucking badass, really, really fucking badass riff that just it's really, really cool. There's a little bit, like to Marty's point, there's a lot of like really fast or really slow, but on this side there is actually like a bit of a Slayer type tempo going on through the verses, which I really, really like. Shirt notwithstanding. But yeah, so definitely Incubus, Bloodstained Visions. Again, like the last track, The Fetus of Disease, there's a lot of riff variety on that one. There's a really cool Doom riff at 420, no pun intended. It just happens to be at 420.
Intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, so and then you think it's about to end, it slows back down again, but then at 6 minutes, there's another riff that's like just really cool, really crazy, and like a really cool banger that just flows right out the end of the record. So yeah, I would say those are my favorites, though. Again, Kellen's point, completely agree. Eternal Procession, the beginning of the song, which I love that they're doing this style of metal without some really contrived kind of intro where you feel like you're falling down a hole or some shit. We've all heard that many times before.
Yeah.
Eternal Procession fucking starts right into the song, crushing immediately, and so it kind of draws you right into there. So those are all standout tracks. 2, 6, and 1. The only one that I think took some time to get going for me is Codex of Flesh, track 5. And again,
wow, you guys are cheating up. It's all on the same page. Yeah. We heard the album the same way then. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting. Like it's like 2 minutes in, there's nothing really interesting happening, but then 2 minutes in, a really cool riff, picks up the song, brings it a lot of energy, and then some really just I'll call them like god-sized riffs at about 5:45, like near the end of the song, carries you out, and so saves it. You know what I mean? So that would be, I would say, my least favorite, but even that one like redeems itself after, but it just sucks that it takes 2 minutes to get there. But aside from that, definitely 2 and 6, and of course the opener for me.
All right. Well, for me, Incubus of Bloodstained Visions. I really like the utterly cavernous doom, and then they throw in the heavy blast beats. It's not like super fast, hyper grind or anything. It's just a quicker blast beat style. It really, on that track alone, all they have to offer is kind of on that. That's kind of their formula is right there for all to see. They don't really, it's kind of unwavering through the whole album. And again, I don't dislike any song on this. I did pick Codex of Flesh. I put good, but lumbering focus, lacks energy and excitement. I mean, that's not a bad thing, but favorite song for me is Exhumed from Mortal Spheres. It starts off blasting, which is kind of refreshing. They jumped right in with it. It's a good, quick hit, brutal riffs, and there's a groove. There's a groove in those riffs. It isn't just, your standard incantation. There's like a really definite, memorable groove to it. As the song goes on, the riffs feel more old school to me. They focus more on note-based riffs as opposed to, just the heavy, chords. That for me is a standout. Really cool. It's a good song. I really like this band in the speed register. I just do. When they pick up the pace a little bit, I think the riffs get a lot more interesting. That to me is where the band really kind of shines on this record. There's so much slow and he's back. So much slow and doomy parts. It's good when the blast beats hit. It's a little bit refreshing, but yeah, those are the standout ones for me. I do need to go revisit the last song because it didn't. I didn't write any notes down for it, but I will re-listen to it knowing that Jim gave it the official thumbs up.
Same here.
But Judgment, final thoughts. Jim.
Well, obviously, I like it. I picked it for this week. I really enjoyed seeing them live. I had the first album too. I actually think I like this one a little bit better. I know we're all in just a little bit of disagreement there, but it makes me want to go back and listen to the first one. You guys And I'm like, well, I must have bought it for some reason. I haven't listened to it in a while. But no, I think it's a solid record. Very, for me, minor missteps. They were fucking fantastic live. They sound just like the album. I mean,
I could see this material really translating well live. I think that would be a cool way to see them for sure.
Yeah, it really did, man. They really pulled it off. They just they seem to be, we've all been to shows where a band doesn't really seem to be into what they're doing. You know what I mean? But this is a band that's really into what they're doing, and crazy drummer guy with tiny drum set. I think he just kind of made it though. He's like this big, tall dude, this tiny drum set, and doing all these weird things. And it was really cool. So yeah, for me, yeah, the album was definitely, I'd say, I don't know, probably like an 8.4, 8.5 for me. I really like this a lot because I think that they are, in the same way, like I said, I think of Crips a lot when I listen to this band, and I think that both of these bands are going to kind of transcend that like sort of wave of like a lot of bands trying to do this but not doing it well, not doing it in a memorable fashion. These guys I think are going to continue, and I think they're going to continue to evolve in such a way where they're going to maintain interest for me. So 2 albums in, I got both of them. You know what I mean? I'm thinking about even going back and trying to look for their old demos and stuff. But
yeah, and the split with Hyperdontia, you gotta check that out too, apparently.
Yeah, I haven't heard that, so yeah, I gotta check that out.
I hadn't even heard the Hyperdontia band. Everybody tells me they're great. I have not heard them.
Cool.
Nexus of Teeth fucking rules.
All right. Nice. Thumbs up from Jim. What do you got, Ben?
Overall, I guess I'd give it like a 6, maybe. So I kind of A-B'd this with Decomposed and their only record. I was just like, what do I need this band to do more of for me to like it more? And I put on Decomposed. And like, they sound quite a bit similar, but I think what I would maybe suggest that they would do, and I have good faith that I think their next album might be like exactly what I want them to be. But if they would like follow through with their ideas for a little bit longer phrases and maybe kind of draw out the more doomy passages with more kind of languishing leads, and just kind of like flesh out those ideas a little bit further, I think that could work to a good effect. And so that might be something that they would mature into a little bit more, that would kind of draw me in or make me love this even more. But for me, what it is, it's a really ultra satisfying, brain scraping kind of sonic thing for me. Compositionally, it's just it's that chugga. Like, it just seems like I really had a hard time like putting my finger on what irked me about like the way the drummer and the guitars just are always in perfect lockstep with one another. It's like they never quite are different enough in tempos. It's almost like there's 2 drummers in the band playing at the same time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So overall, yeah, like I like this more on a sonic level than like a deep thinking composition kind of artistic sort of thing.
Okay.
I'll probably buy the next one too.
Right on. Kellen.
I was looking over the list out of the bands that are playing out of the region right now, and I would say this, like, I don't own between the Fetid, Witch Vomit, Cerebral Rot, Disembowel, Trivium Foul, and Ossuarium. I own this couple so I had the first Mortiferum and Cerebral Rot. I picked up the second Cerebral Rot record and was not completely blown away with that one either.
The first one is way better.
Okay, so,
I'm with you on the second one.
So I would say like the drop off between first and second records, I feel is more severe for Cerebral Rot relative to the,
same.
What'd you think of Fetid? I mean, everybody was ranting and raving about that. I got the CD and it's just kind of okay. It's just really basic level of this sound, you know.
I would my response to that would be I would rather invest more in Mortiferum.
Yeah.
Meaning like I really would be intrigued if that happens, if they, because I know some people kind of feel a little bit like protective of what Death Doom is, right? Like this is not Paradise Lost, right? So
Night Bride.
so I would be interested to see if they do sort of expand, because they also, I believe, play in Caustic Wound, correct?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that band,
busy.
That band is like a bit more of a death grind. Like it's a awesome project. But if it's sort of the polarity between the two sort of grew a little bit, I think would be really interesting if they sort of expanded a little bit more ideas and they sort of built on sort of melodic concept for this project. That'd be really interesting. But I would say, like, I'm interested enough to sort of, in the same way that like I would pick up multiple Crips records. I feel that same way about this band. I think out of the many bands that are playing in this style, they're one of the better out there.
Yeah.
And the first record made enough of an impression on me to sort of keep me committed to that idea.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really liked it. If I were to see this in a record store, absolutely it'd come home with me. So seal of approval, thumbs up from my end.
Right on. And me too. I give it, early on, I was thinking, oh, this is a 6 or 6.5. And as of today, I'm thinking it's a 7. It's growing on me. It's growing on me more. And again, it's not because it's bad. It's just all the things I've already said. I'm not going to repeat myself again, but I own it. Their next album, I'll get that too, because these guys are really good. And I really do like what they're doing. Again, the first album to me, I think the songwriting is a little bit better. I like the brighter production. But the production on this is outstanding for what it is. It's just deep, dark, and murky, but clear. Yeah, I mean, obviously I own it, so I don't need to pick it up. But yeah, I mean, this band has got me. I'll buy their next thing. I need to get the split with the Hyperdontia, but yeah, so that's it. I mean, we all 4 thumbs up. I mean, it doesn't rank super high for a couple of us, but it's still a good record. Which leads us to next week. It's time, boys. Astro Fortress. I bought it. I said I was never going to buy another Dark Throne record, but I bought it because I can't help it. God,
we never believed you, Marty.
Am I going to listen to it much? A little foreshadowing here. No. But yep, next week, Dark Thrones, Astral Fortress.
I haven't listened to it yet. I've been waiting for this week to like. Yeah,
I've not heard a single note.
Yeah.
I picked up the record.
My expectations are low, so
I picked up the record, obviously, and it just feels very cheap. I mean, it's just, I don't know, man. Whatever. It's Dark Throne. I don't want to not have a Dark Throne record, but I don't know. So that's it. Dark Throne. We're going there. It's time. Newest release. And I'm sure we'll have a good discussion about it, which is the whole point. And before we jump, show notes Friday, we will be joined for the first time by Scott Waters from No Life Till Metal, the YouTube channel, and also the graphics company and record label. He'll be on, and we'll be talking about Christian metal favorites. We'll talk about the scene. I know you can watch Ben poop his pants. But
nice.
We're going to talk about our favorite Christian metal bands. We're going to talk about the subgenre of music and what it's all about. It should be a fun time. We've never crossed that bridge before with this channel, and it's time. It is long overdue. We have talked about Paramecium on the album club. We reviewed Exhumed of Earth early on, so go back and watch that. But that's it. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Oh, go check out everybody's channel. Go buy some tapes from Eihwaz Recordings. Kellen still has a really killer video up about audiophiles and metalheads, talking about gear, talking about, is it that important for a metalhead to invest in high-end gear to listen to Dark Throne? I just posted a video on it last night, a response video, and it'd be interesting to see what everybody thinks. Go in there, check it out, make your own video in response or comment. always fun to interact with everybody. But anybody have anything to add? No. We're good.
Keep it metal.
Jesus, King of Kings. Some Striper for y'all.
Up, Chris
And
from
also
Depeche.
upside down crosses.
Depeche Commode's getting ready to do his response video, so get ready. That'll be fun.
Awesome, Chris.
But okay, guys, it was awesome. Thanks again, as always. Great time, and everybody have a great night and a great week. And Christmas is only a few days away. Cheers, everyone. We'll see you Friday.
Merry Christless.